Now that we spent some time looking at the key words in our scenarios, words like more than, times, product of, is equal to, let's focus on some word problems that deal with consecutive integers. When we talk about consecutive integers, we're going to break down into three categories: consecutive integers, consecutive even integers, and consecutive odd integers. Let's focus on consecutive integers first. Example of consecutive integers: 11, 12, 13, 14, and so on and so forth would be consecutive integers. Well, if they're asking us in a scenario to find 3 or 4 or 5 consecutive integers, we're not going to know where those consecutive integers start because we're trying to find those numbers. Well, if we don't know the value of a number, we have to just refer to it as a variable. You could refer to it as x. I'm going to refer to it as n in this case, n meaning for number. Well, if I'm looking at my list of consecutive integers and I want to go from one integer to the next, what operation have I performed if I'm going from 11 to 12? Well, I've added 1. Well, if my first number is going to be n, and we're going to call this our first number in this scenario, well, then my second number is just simply going to be n plus 1. And my third number, I'm going to add 1 more to that, so it's going to be n plus 2. And I keep going as long as I want. So if the problem says find 3 consecutive even integers, my first one I'm going to call n, second n plus 1, and the third n plus 2, because for me to move down my list of consecutives, I just simply adding 1 each time. Well, evens are a little bit different. If I want to look at consecutive even integers, I might be looking at this like 20, 22, 24, and so on and so forth. Well, here's the thing. How do I know that a number is even? Well, first of all, we know that every single even number is divisible by 2. We know that. So every even number has to be divisible by 2. So that means that I'm going to have to write this using the number 2 in some way. So in case of the even integers, we're actually going to start out by using 2n. And this guarantees that that is an even integer. So my first term is going to be 2n. Well, then if I look, instead of adding 1 each time, I'm adding 2. From 20 to 22, 22 to 24. So my second is going to be 2n plus 2. 2n plus 4. 2n plus 6 plus 8 plus 10. If I start with 2n as my even integer, this is only when you're talking about evens here, every time I'm just going to add on the next even number, plus 2, plus 4, plus 6. Odd integers. Well, think about it. If 2n represents an even integer, for example 20, how am I going to go from an even integer to an odd integer? Well, if I'm looking at a number like 20, for example, or 80, or 68, the next number is odd. So all I'm going to have to do is add 1. This is how I'm going to indicate every odd number. So my even number was 2n. My odd number is 2n plus 1. So when I go to set up my terms, 2n plus 1 is my first odd number. 2n plus 3 would be my next odd number. 2n plus 5, and so on and so forth. Notice that I'm adding odd numbers each time. In the evens, I was adding even numbers each time. We'll look at a couple examples in class. At the bottom of the sheet you have, just try and look at those. The first one talks about just consecutive integers, And on the back, it talks about consecutive evens and consecutive odds. They're the three that we're going to look at beginning in class tomorrow.